Anyways, I love Magic the Gathering and I love Lord of the Rings. So when I discovered that they were making a Lord of the Rings themed Magic the Gathering set, I pretty much freaked out because it's like two great things that taste great together. You know what I mean? I love it when things that I love come together like this. So they have just recently released the full list of all the cards with all their art from the set. It's coming out June 20th, I believe. Um, or earlier, I think, if you do like do the pre-release event at a store or something. Um, but anyway, I went through the list and I screenshotted some of my favorite and more what I thought were the coolest or most interesting cards, and I thought I'd run through them real quick and just talk about them all here. Um, Starting out here with the Mordor Trebuchet, which is 2 and 1 black mana. Artifact creature wall. It's a 1/4 with defender. Whenever you attack with one or more goblins and or orcs, create a 2/1 colorless construct artifact creature token with flying named Ballistic Boulder that's tapped and attacking. Sacrifice that token at end of combat. I love this because it's like as your goblins attack, you're firing the trebuchet and it fires these boulders. I don't know. I just love the way they've managed to capture the idea of a trebuchet in the mechanics of Magic. I think that's very clever. Um, this one I love because, well, the art is fantastic. The Nazgul are so cool. It's 2 and a black mana creature, Wraith Knight. Has Death Touch. It's only a 1/2, which feels a little like weak for a Nazgul. But when he enters the battlefield, the ring tempts you, this is the big like new mechanic around this set, is that there's the concept of the ring and it tempting you, and each time it tempts you, you have to choose one of your creatures as a ring bearer, and then you gain new abilities based on how many times the ring has tempted you. It's pretty wild, and there's actually not many downsides to being tempted by the ring. Um, but as you see here, whenever the ring tempts you, put a +1/+1 counter on each wraith you control. A deck can have up to 9 cards named Nazgul. I love that. That's a great little story feature that I really like. Normally, a deck can only have 4 of a single card, but because of course there were 9 ring wraiths, then there were 9 Nazgul. You can have 9 of them in your deck, which is really cool. So I guess that makes sense why it's a little bit weaker than you might think it would be, because you can have 9 of them, I guess. And it does, of course, become stronger very quickly whenever the ring tempts you. They all get stronger. So if you had a bunch of these guys out, that would trigger for each one. Every time the ring tempt you, for each one of them, they all get a +1/+1 counter. So that's wild. The more of them you have out, the faster they're going to get really big and nasty. So that's cool. Here's Voracious Fell Beast. This is, of course, the flying beast that the Nazgul rode in the later part of the story. This will cost you 4 and 2 black mana, flying 4/4. When Voracious Fellbeast enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Create a food token for each creature sacrificed this way. Again, I love the story here. Like, not only does your opponent have to give up a creature, it's like the Fellbeast ate it. It turns it into food, which is pretty brutal. Food tokens are a big thing in this set. They come up a lot, and there's a lot of creatures who take advantage of them or use them in particular ways. Okay, and now we move on to some white cards. So this is Bill the Pony. Everybody loves Bill the Pony. You can't not love Bill the Pony. I love this illustration of Bill as well here, and he is a legendary creature. There are a lot of legendaries in this set too, and a lot of cards that refer to legendaries or act on legendaries. Anyway, when Bill the Pony enters the battlefield, create 2 food tokens. So Bill's got some food with him. Sacrifice a food. Until end of turn, target creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. So that's kind of cool. So you can have, like, Bill is only a 1/4, but if you sacrifice a food, all of a sudden he can hit for 4. So that's pretty cool. Um, this one is really surprisingly powerful, I thought, for a card that's only 2 white mana. The Flowering of the White Tree. It's a rare card, and it's a legendary enchantment. Legendary creatures you control get +2/+1 and have Ward 1. Non-legendary creatures you control get +1/+1. Like, that just toughens up everybody, and it makes legendary creatures really brutal. So that's a cool one. Um, Forge anew. Of course, this is a reference to Anduril, the broken sword being reforged. It's an enchantment. It's 2 and 1 white. When Forge anew enters the battlefield, return target equipment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And again, I love the story. The story element there is you're taking an equipment that's been destroyed and you're bringing it back. You're forging it anew. As long as it's your turn, you may activate equip abilities anytime you could cast an instant. That's pretty cool. And then you may pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equip ability you activate during each of your turns. That can be wildly powerful, especially if you have some really nasty equipment in your deck. Like there are some equipments like giant hammers and stuff that can give you like enormous amounts of power. And the way they're balanced is that they cost a lot to equip. Now they could cost 0 if you use this card. So that's pretty wild. Here's Frodo, Sauron's Bane. This is really cool. It's only a one white mana to play this guy, and then he can upgrade into some really powerful abilities. So you pay 2 white or 2 black. If Frodo Sauron's Bane is a citizen, it becomes a halfling scout with base power and toughness 2/3 and lifelink. So he starts at 1/2. He gains lifelink and becomes 2/3 if you pay those 2, and then if you then pay 3 black, if Frodo is a scout, it becomes a halfling rogue. With whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game if the ring has tempted you 4 or more times this game. Otherwise, the ring tempts you. So that's wild. If you can get Frodo out, turn him into this halfling rogue, and start hitting your opponent, he's going to lose really quickly. So that's wild. That's a pretty powerful card, especially for starting out at only 1 white mana. Of course, it is going to cost you more to get him up to this full power, but if you can protect him and get him there, that's going to be pretty cool. And here's Hobbit's Sting. Of course, this is referring to Sting, Bilbo's sword that he gives to Frodo. This is an instant. It's 1 and 1 white mana. Hobbit Sting deals X damage to target creature, where X is the number of creatures you control, plus the number of foods you control. Now, I might be reading a little bit too much into this, but what this card makes me think of is a pretty famous quote from Tolkien's work about hobbits and how if other people valued food and fellowship as much as hobbits do, it would be a happier world. So I feel like that's kind of what this card is referencing. It's saying X is the amount of food and fellowship you have. It's the number of creatures you control, the fellowship, the people around your character, and it's the number of foods you control. So that's pretty cool. And that could be, if you got like a token deck or something that's got a bunch of creatures out, that could be a lot of damage really fast. So that could be a real brutal card for only 2 mana. So that's pretty cool. Rosie Cotton of South Lane, maybe sort of a lesser known character from the books. This is the girl back home that Sam is sweet on, and that he ends up spoilers, that he ends up marrying at the end of the story. But she's pretty cool here. She's 2 and 1 white mana. She's only a 1/1, but she's a legendary creature. And when she enters the battlefield, you create a food token, and it says whenever you create a token, so that's a token of any kind, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control other than Rosie. So if you've got a token deck again, and token decks are a lot of fun, she could start beefing up your creatures really fast. So that's really cool. That's not even a lot of times abilities like that are like, wow, this only triggers once per turn. It does not say that. It says whenever you create a token, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control other than Rosie. So you're going to want to protect her because she's not very strong. She's only a 1/1, but she could really beef up your other guys. So that's pretty cool. Um, this is another cool one. This is a saga. There are a number of cards that refer to sagas in this set, especially Tom Bombadil. We'll get to him later. But this is War of the Last Alliance. For steps 1 and 2 for this one, you search your library for a legendary creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. That's really cool. You can just grab any legendary out of your deck and stick it in your hand. That's really nice. And you get to do it twice. And then on the third set, creatures you control gain double strike until end of turn, and the ring tempts you. Double strike is really powerful, and the way I'm reading it, getting tempted by the ring is a pretty big deal in this set. It's going to be really useful. So that's cool. This is a rare with 3 and 1 white. So now we're getting into blue. A lot of magic, a lot of elf stuff in here. A lot of scrying. Scrying is a big thing in this set as well. So here's Arwen's Gift, 3 and 1 blue, sorcery. The spell costs 1 less to cast if you control 2 or more legendary creatures. Again, it's all about the legendary here. You want a lot of legendaries in these decks. Scry 2, then draw 2 cards. So that's real nice. This really gets you 2 more cards. For only 4 mana, you get 2 more cards, and you get to sort of choose to a certain extent via the scry mechanic what those cards are going to be. And this can even be cheaper. It's 1 less to cast if you control 2 or more legendary creatures. I mean, that's only a 3 mana card for 2 cards. That's pretty nice. That's a pretty good card. This is another fun saga, the Bath Song. This refers to when the hobbits all get together and they take a bath and they're all singing together. It's kind of a fun moment early on in the story before things get really dark. But this will cost you 3 and 1 blue. The first 2 steps, you draw 2 cards, then discard a card. So you're getting lots of cards and getting rid of ones you don't want. So that's pretty cool. And then step 3, shuffle. This is wild. Shuffle any number of target cards from your graveyard into your library and add 2 blue mana. That's wild to me. You can take anything, any number of cards. You could take your whole graveyard and shuffle it back into your library and get it back. I mean, that's wild. So that's really cool. This one is Bewitching Leechcraft. Now, this one I actually added in here because I don't really understand it or how it's going to be all that useful. So it's a 1 and 1 blue. It's an enchantment aura. You enchant a creature. When Bewitching Leechcraft enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. So you're tapping a creature with it. And then enchanted creature has, if this creature would untap during your untap step, remove a +1/+1 counter from it instead. If you do, untap it. I find that very confusing, and I don't really see how this is useful. I guess what you're doing is you're playing this on your opponent's creature. But the "your" there is what confuses me. If this creature would untap during your untap step, who's you in this instance? Normally, "your" refers to the person who played the card, but are they talking about the controller of the creature? Because if it's me and it's an opponent's creature, it's not going to untap during my untap step. So this is never even going to come up. So I don't know. I feel like this is a confusing card, and I'm not really sure I understand what the point of it is. And if you're playing it on your own creature, then I really don't get it, because then you're just making your creature weaker to untap it. That doesn't make sense. So I don't know. It's confusing. And this is another fun like story character thing here with Bill Ferny, Bree Swindler. Bill Ferny is a guy that they meet early on in Bree, who ends up betraying them to the bad guys. He's a 1 and 1 blue. He's a human rogue. He's legendary as well. He's a 2/1. But this is the fun story bit here. It says, whenever Bill Ferny, Bree Swindler becomes blocked, choose one. Create a treasure token, or target opponent gains control of target horse you control. If they do, remove Bill Ferny from combat and create 3 treasure tokens. So this is sort of referring to the fact that in the story, Sam ends up, the Fellowship ends up getting Bill's pony, Bill Ferny's pony, and they name it Bill. That's Bill the pony who came up earlier. So, and he, yeah, I don't know. I love that little story twist there that he's like, when he gets blocked, he loses his horse. I thought that was cool. He doesn't really seem to be a very useful card. The treasure is nice. Um, so that, I mean, that's the good thing about him. If he gets blocked, then you either get a treasure or you give your opponent a horse, and then this guy goes away and you get three treasures. So he's about creating treasure. So that's what he's good for. But it's a kind of a goofy card, but I like it. This one is surprisingly powerful, I thought, for a one mana card. This one blue mana. It's a common card. It's a sorcery. Draw a card, the ring tempts you. Usually, drawing a card is a little more expensive in Magic. And then the fact that you not only get to draw a card, but also the ring tempts you is, I feel like, going to be pretty powerful. I feel like this is going to be a pretty powerful card. I'm kind of surprised that it's a common. And of course, the reference here is to Bilbo's birthday party when he puts on the ring and disappears. You can see his footprints here. I love the art on these cards as he slips away from the birthday tent. um, this one is Hithling Knots, 1/1 blue instant, tap target creature, scry 1, draw a card. Again, I thought this was interesting that it's a common, it's only 2 blue mana, and it lets you do 3 of these things. You get to tap somebody, you get to scry, and you get to draw a card. It just seemed surprisingly powerful to me for a 2 mana card. Um, Here's Lost Isle Calling, 1/1 blue enchantment. Whenever you scry, put a verse counter on Lost Isle Calling. It's always interesting when they come up with these new counter ideas. So this one has verse counters, which I've never heard of before, and I think are new. They're unique to this card. And then you can pay 4 and 2 blue mana and exile this card, and you draw a card for each verse counter on Lost Isle Calling. If it had 7 or more verse counters on it, take an extra turn after this one. Activate only as a sorcery. Now, that's a power they always try to make. That's a very expensive power because it's very powerful to be able to take 2 turns in a row. So, like, that's pretty wild. But it is only a 2 mana card, but then you have to pay 6 more mana and exile it to be able to get this extra turn. And you have to have scryed in the meantime 7 times. So, this is for a deck where you're going to be scrying a whole lot. So there are a lot of scry cards in this set. So imagine if you have like a blue-green deck, you could do a lot of scrying with elves and stuff, and maybe this one would be useful. But it seems powerful, but then you think about how much work you're going to have to do to get to this point where you get that extra turn. That's going to be pretty hard. So I don't know. It's an interesting card, and it does. I like the story element is that this is I believe referring to the elves and their desire to go west out of Middle Earth. The Lost Isle is calling them. You see the seabirds in the air in the image here, so that's pretty cool. This card I love for multiple reasons. One reason is this is one of my favorite scenes in the book, which is when Aragorn reveals himself to Sauron in the Palantir and reveals Anduril, the reforged blade. Basically, I just feel like this is like one of the most ballsy things anybody does in the books. Like, he literally takes the Palantir, knowing that it's a communication device with Sauron. He pits his own will against the Dark Lords, and he says, "Yo, look at this. I'm coming for you." I just think that's so badass, and I love the illustration here. It just looks so great. I love the way they've pictured this. It's very cool. And as far as what the card does, it's 2 and 2 blue mana. It's an instant. Return target spell or non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So you're kicking something back into your opponent's hand. You may cast an instant or sorcery spell with equal or lesser mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. So that's really cool. You're kicking something back. You're either countering it or you're kicking out something that's already out. And then you get to play something else for free. So that's a really cool card, I think. And I love the art. I love the story part. Just great. This one is cool. So these are Rangers of Ithilien. The Rangers here, human ranger creature. So this is 2 and 2 blue mana, a 3/3, and they have vigilance. When Rangers of Ithilien enters the battlefield, gain control of up to 1 target creature with lesser power for as long as you control Rangers of Ithilien. Then the ring tempts you. That seems really cool to me. You get to steal one of your opponent's lesser creatures, for as long as you control Rangers of Ithilien. Now, usually when you something that gives you the ability to steal a creature from your opponent, it usually only lasts until the end of the turn, or sometimes you gain control of it like permanently, but that usually costs a ton of mana. So for 4 mana, you get this creature until this guy leaves the battlefield. So you could have him like the rest of the game if this guy manages to survive, and you get the ring tempting you, and they have vigilance. So this is a good card, I think. I like this one, and it is a rare, so that makes sense. Um, Here's Saruman the White, which oddly is a blue card. It's 4 and 1 blue, but of course wizards do tend to be blue. He is a legendary avatar wizard. He's a 4/4 with Ward 2. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, amass orcs 2. So this is another big mechanic in this set, which is amass, which means, as you can see here, you put a number of +1/+1 counters on an army you control. It's also an orc. If you don't control an army, create a 0/0 black orc army creature token first. So the weird thing about amass is that you're basically just making one big creature that just keeps getting bigger and bigger as you get more amass. So amass orcs 2 means you get a 2/2 creature. Or if you already have an orcs army out, that creature gets 2 stronger, right? But that seems weird to me. I feel like if you're amassing an army, it should really be a bunch of little tokens, not just one big guy who keeps getting bigger and bigger. But I guess that one guy is supposed to represent a whole army, so it makes a certain amount of sense. And amass is orcs is something that comes up a lot in the blue and black cards in this set, and I think the red as well. So that could be pretty powerful. You could end up with some pretty big, horrible orc armies pretty fast. So that's pretty cool, especially this one. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you get that 2+1/+1 on an army. So that could be a big, horrible dude really fast. So that's interesting. Here's another Saruman related card. This is Storm of Saruman, 4 and 2 blue, Ward 3. It's an enchantment. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it. Except the copy isn't legendary. You may choose new targets for the copy. Cards that let you copy other ones can be super powerful, especially if you have something, really nasty down. You get this guy out, first, and then you play some spells, and you could do some horrible stuff really fast here. That second spell, especially that it says except the copy isn't legendary. That means if your second spell is a legendary character, you suddenly have 2 of that guy, and they get to be there together. Because if the second one isn't legendary, he's not gonna kick out the first one. So that's wild. That could be really nasty if you play that right. If you can use it right. I mean, it'll be pretty tricky because this does cost you 6 mana, and then you've got to survive to the next turn, and you've got to play 2 spells because it's the second spell that it copies. But still, if you've built up enough mana, that's gonna be pretty powerful. This one is surprisingly complicated and weird. It took me a while to get my head around it. So this is the Watcher in the Water. This is the monster that they meet outside of Moria. It costs you 3 and 2 blue. It's a 9/9, so it's an enormous monster. But here's the weird rules around it. So it enters the battlefield tapped with 9 stun counters on it. So a stun counter means, it says here, if a permanent with a stun counter would become untapped, remove one from it instead. So it's going to take 9 turns to wake up. Otherwise, it just sits there being useless. But it says, whenever you draw a card during an opponent's turn, so this is for a blue deck, obviously, so you want to be like playing instants that let you draw cards during your opponent's turn. Create a 1/1 blue tentacle creature token. So it's like, as it's sitting there sleeping under the water, you're drawing cards during your opponent's turn, and its tentacles are like coming up to the surface. I guess that's the idea here. But then here's the weird thing. It says whenever a tentacle you control dies, untap up to 1 target Kraken and put a stun counter on up to 1 target non-land permanent. So as the tentacles get knocked down, the Kraken, your Watcher in the Water, or any other Kraken that you might have, but I think the idea is the Watcher in the Water, wakes up faster. So as you cut down his tentacles, his stun counters go away, And then meanwhile, he's stunning your guys, your opponent's guys. The stun counters come off and go on your opponent. So that's pretty cool. I can see how that would be pretty powerful because those little 1/1 creatures are going to be super annoying because you're not really going to want to kill them because as you kill them, they start stunning you and they wake up this giant 9/9 monster faster. So that's pretty neat. But you are going to have a bunch of cards that let you draw cards during your opponent's turn. So this would have to be a carefully constructed deck, I imagine, to make this thing work. Which, of course, anything that's like this weird, complicated mechanic like this, I tend to like to build decks around these and try to figure it out and make it work. And usually I lose a lot of games that way, but there you go. Here's Gothmog, Morgul Lieutenant. He's 3 and 1 black. He's a 3/3 legendary creature. He's a human, which is interesting. When Gothmog, Morgul Lieutenant enters the battlefield, amass orcs 1. So we talked about that already. So you're building up your orc army as this guy comes out. Creature tokens you control have death touch. So this is another guy who's going to be great for a token deck because all of a sudden all of your tokens are deadly. If they if they hit somebody at all, that creature's dead. So that's going to be pretty powerful, and he helps you amass your orcs. So that's pretty cool. He's a pretty cool guy. Now, this is a new thing for this set as well. Legendary instants. That's new. Instants have never been legendary before. And what that means, because normally that doesn't, like legendary instant, what does that mean? That doesn't even make sense because legendary just means you can't have more than one on the battlefield at a time. But in this case, what a legendary instant means is you can only cast it if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker. So that's interesting. So this is 2 and 2 black mana. It's Isildur's Fateful Strike. So this is really cool. This is the moment that Isildur cut the ring from Sauron's hand. You can see his hand is like burning red and his fingers are getting chopped off. So this is your standard destroy target creature card, but it adds if its controller has more than 4 cards in hand, they exile cards from their hand equal to the difference. So that's pretty powerful. If you've got your opponent and they've got card advantage on you, you could just wipe out one of their dudes and like empty out their hand. So that's pretty cool. And I love the connection to the story there because you're cutting his fingers off, and you're removing cards. You're taking away the ability of your opponent. I like that connection. That's cool. Here's another fun one. So she's even really from The Hobbit originally. She gets introduced, this character, Lobelia Sackville Baggins. She's a black mana card, so 2 and 1 black. She's a 2/3 legendary halfling citizen. She has flash and menace, so she just pops out, and you need at least 2 people to block her. When Lobelia Sackville Baggins enters the battlefield, exile target creature card from an opponent's graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn. Then create X treasure tokens where X is the exiled card's power. So I love this. They even show her in the illustration here, it's a great illustration, holding the spoons. So this is one of the funny things in Bilbo. She always wanted Bilbo's hobbit hole, Bag End, and he's convinced that, when they tried to auction off his stuff and she tried to take over his hobbit hole, that she stole his spoons. So I love that they have that reference in this image. It's great. And I love the story feature of her ability here is that, if somebody died, she makes money off it. She exiles that person and you get treasure based on, how powerful that creature was. So I love the story there. I love the image. It's just great. That's a lot of fun, that card. That's a rare card, so that's interesting. Here's another one, March from the Black Gate. This is an enchantment, 1 and 1 black. When March from the Black Gate enters the battlefield, and whenever an army you control attacks, amass orcs 1. So this is another amass card, but this one is wild. So it's whenever it enters and whenever an army attacks. So your army is just gonna keep getting bigger and bigger if this thing is out. Every time that army attacks, and I that's powerful. That it's whenever it attacks. It's not whenever it does damage. It's as soon as it attacks, it gets bigger. So like that's nasty, and that's only 2 mana. So that could be really cool. That you could build up a big ugly army really fast with that. This is another great one for a token deck. Mirkwood Bats, it's 3 and 1 black. It's a 2/3 with flying. Whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. So that's you could if you've got a token deck that and like some kind of deck that's like got one of those cards that lets you, every time you make a token, you make an extra token. Like there's a Gandalf card in here that lets you do that, and I'm thinking also of a card from All Will Be One, the Phyrexia set that came out recently, that lets you create multiple tokens. You could start doing some serious damage, and this is each opponent. So of course, this is a card that could be useful when playing a commander or something. And this is a common card, so it does cost you a lot. I mean, 4 mana is kind of heavy. It's kind of a expensive cost for a 2/3, but that ability could be really powerful. Um, and here's Breaking of the Fellowship, which is this is a big pivotal moment in the story. You can see the quote here from Boromir at the bottom. It might have been mine. It should be mine. Give it to me. And this is a 1 and 1 red sorcery. Target creature and opponent controls deals damage equal to its power to another target creature that player controls. The ring tempts you. I love the story here. This is like you're sowing discontent among the ranks of your enemy. The ring is tempting you. Your enemies are fighting each other. It's brilliant. It really kind of captures that concept of the breaking of the fellowship. And also, this is a cool idea because a lot of times there are a lot of like green cards that let you do damage. It lets one of your creatures deal damage equal to its power to one of your opponent's creatures. So this one is interesting. I think that you're having your opponent's creatures fight each other. That's really cool. This one seemed really powerful to me. So this is a rare card. It's 1 and 2 red. It's an instant display of power. This spell can't be copied. Copy any number of target instant and or sorcery spells. You may choose new targets for the copies. Whoa, any number. That's wild. But I mean, it is instant and sorcery. So those are cards that come out and then they're done. Like they get expended. So I guess what this means is you'd have to play this on the stack. You'd have to have already just played like an instant or a sorcery. And then maybe your opponent plays a counter and then you play another one and then you play this. So you want like a stack of spells so that you can copy like a bunch of different spells. But I guess, it seems really powerful, that any number, but it's not really as powerful as it seems at first, because how many are you really going to have on the stack at a time? I don't think this means you can copy them. Like they have to be out. They have to be in play for you to copy them. So like you can't just copy them from your hand or something. But it could be pretty powerful. If you've got like a red deck with a lot of little instants that do damage, you could play like a couple of them and then play this on top. And suddenly you've done an enormous amount of damage all at once, which is of course the trick that red is always pulling. And here's another fun red one. This is Fear Fire Foes. I love the art on this one. I love the reference. This is referring to when the Nazgul attack the Shire in the Fellowship. Is actually one of the few parts of the story that are from someone else's point of view that is not a member of the Fellowship. It's from Fatty Bulger's point of view. He's back at the house in Crick Hollow, and the Nazgul attack, and he runs and sets off the alarm, and the Nazgul have to run. But anyway, it's a sorcery. It's an X and 1 red. Damage can't be prevented this turn. Deals X damage to target creature and 1 damage to each other creature with the same controller. So however much mana you got, you can do that much damage to one of your opponent's creatures, and then it spreads out and hits all the other ones for 1, which could be really powerful if you're attacking somebody who's got like a token deck with a bunch of like 1/1s lying there. You could take down a big guy and then wipe out the rest of his army. So that could be really powerful. But it is kind of specific. You could end up doing 1 damage to a bunch of tough creatures that don't really it doesn't really help that much. But that X there is pretty powerful. You could, if you're going up against a big guy and you don't have a card that does enough damage, you spend all your mana and take him out with this. Okay, so moving along, here is Fiery Inscription. Oh, I seem to have caught my volume bar on the when I screenshotted this one. But this one is 2 in a red. It's an enchantment, and this is referring, of course, to the inscription that appears on the one ring when you get it hot when Gandalf throws it in the fire. And you can, and it actually has the inscription written at the bottom of the card there in the language of Mordor. I'm not going to try to read that. I'm not really entirely sure how you pronounce that, but it sounds really nasty when they say it out loud in the movie. But it's an enchantment. When Fiery Inscription enters the battlefield, the ring tempts you. There's that again. And then it says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Fire Inscription deals 2 damage to each opponent. So that's pretty nasty, especially if you've got like a red-blue deck, let's say, that's full of like little instants and sorcery cards. You know, those red-blue decks can be pretty powerful with something like this. So suddenly you're smacking everybody really hard with all your instants and sorceries, hitting them for 2 every time. Like that could be pretty nasty. So that's a pretty cool one. Here's another red, Fire of Orthanc, 3 in 1 red sorcery, destroy target artifact or land. Creatures without flying can't block this turn. This one blew me away. There aren't really a lot of cards, at least not that I'm aware of, that just destroy lands. That's nasty. A lot of times, you know, there'll be certain lands that have like special power that you can sacrifice them and they'll take out your opponent's land. But a lot of times they'll also let your opponent then replace that land with another one. This one is just like, boom, your land is gone. That's nasty. I mean, it does cost you 4 mana, but wow, it can really take away the options of your opponent. And the creatures without flying can't block. That's interesting too. Um, Hew the Entwood. This is referring, of course, to when the orcs are like chopping down all the trees at the behest of Saruman. This is 3 and 2 red sorcery. Sacrifice any number of lands. Again, we're talking about lands, so this is you giving up your own lands. And then reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of lands you sacrificed. Choose any number of artifact and or land cards revealed this way. Put all non-land cards chosen this way onto the battlefield. So you want like a big heavy artifact deck for this one, because they're just gonna all, you play this and suddenly you've got a bunch of artifacts out on the field. Then put all land cards chosen this way onto the battlefield tapped. Then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is kind of a wild card. So you want a deck with a lot of, I mean, obviously you're going to have a lot of lands, and you're going to want a lot of artifacts. And you're like giving up lands to maybe get lands back, but you might not get that many back. It's interesting depending on what you draw, and then you're hoping you're going to pull out some nasty artifacts that are going to help you, I guess. Maybe you could use this with like an equip deck or something. I don't know. It's an interesting card. I just thought it was interesting. I'm not sure it would be easy to use, but it's definitely interesting. This one I love. I love the art on this. I love this moment. This is one of my favorite moments in the story when Eowyn takes down the King of the Nazgul with the help of Merry here, stabbing him. Smite the Deathless. 1 in 1 red instant. Smite the Deathless deals 3 damage to a target creature. That creature loses indestructible until end of turn. I love that. That's a great story idea there. It's like, you've got this horrible indestructible monster. Well, it's not indestructible anymore. Boom. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. No living man am I. Great stuff. Love the card. It would probably be hard to use in some cases. Because, I mean, if 3 damage is going to kill an indestructible creature, I don't know. You might have to hit him a couple times first and then pull this out to actually finish them off. But it's cool. I really like the art. I love the concept. This one is crazy. So this is a rare enchantment saga, 3 and 2 red. There and Back Again. So this is obviously a reference to The Hobbit. That's the alternate title or subtitle of The Hobbit is There and Back Again. So this is like telling the story of The Hobbit in a saga here. Step 1 is up to 1 target creature can't block for as long as you control There and Back Again. The ring tempts you. So that's cool. You get a ring tempt, and you've got somebody who you can make somebody so they can't block. Then second step, search your library for a mountain card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. So you get a free land. That's cool. Now this is the really wild part. Step three, create Smaug, a legendary 6/6 red dragon creature token with flying, haste, and when this creature dies, create 14 treasure tokens. That is crazy. You get to step three on this, and you've got this horrible monster who like is powerful and fast. And when he dies, you get 14 treasure tokens, which just lets you do like whatever you want. That is nuts. I love that card. I'm definitely going to be building decks around this card. So that one's crazy. Okay, let's look at some green. So we've got Elven Chorus, 3/1 green enchantment. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library. Creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. So this is like your classic green kind of card, but it's got that interesting element that you can just look at the top of your library. So it's like you have an extra card at all times that you could theoretically play if it's a creature. So you want a creature heavy deck for this one, obviously, and it's going to get you, all your creatures suddenly can give you more mana. That's always useful. Um, so that's a pretty cool one. It's a rare for 4 mana. Yeah, interesting card. This one's fun. It's Fangorn, Tree Shepherd. So this is the sort of Lord of the Ents in a way. Legendary creature, Tree Folk. It's 4 and 3 green mana. Tree Folk you control have vigilance. So all your Ents are vigilant. Whenever one or more Tree Folk you control attack, add twice that much green mana. That's pretty wild. So you can like attack with your Ents and then suddenly play out, even more creatures because you've got all of this mana. You don't lose unspent green mana as steps and phases end. So that's really cool too. And also, by the way, Fangorn is a 4/10. So he's 4 is, pretty good amount of power, but 10 is a ton of toughness. So he's going to be sitting there unless somebody can like blast him away with a destroy creature or exile or something. Um, he's going to be hard to knock down. Just in basic creature fighting. um, he's going to be a great wall to protect you too. So here we go. This is another one where I love the story here. This is Gimli receiving his gift from Galadriel, which was 3 strands of her hair, which is a great story. It's one of those great story moments because, especially if you know the lore behind this, and you know that back in the story of the Silmarillion, a very famous character named Feanor asked Galadriel for 1 strand of her hair 3 times, and every time she refused him. But Gimli asks once for 1 strand, and she gives him 3. So really interesting moment in the story. And this is an enchantment aura, 3/1 green flash enchant creature. When Gift of Strands enters the battlefield, scry 2. So there's scrying again. That they really connect the elves with scrying a lot, which makes a certain amount of sense, especially Galadriel. And enchanted creature gets +3/+3. So you get to scry and pump up a creature. So that's a pretty cool card. And again, I love the illustration there. It's great. And this is another powerful one. Last March of the Ents now will cost you 8, 6 and 2 green. But it can't be countered, and you draw cards equal to the greatest toughness among creatures you control, then put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Whoa. Suddenly you could have an army out. So this is again another great one for like a very creature heavy green deck. You could suddenly have a bunch of really nasty dudes pop out. And it can't be countered. I always like that. I hate I hate when you're playing against a blue deck and you pull out some awesome card and then they're just like, nope. So that's always nice. You can't be countered. Here's Legolas, a great character from the Fellowship. This is 1 and 2 green. He's a legendary elf archer. He has reach, of course. All archers have reach. He's a rare card, 1/4. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Legolas Master Archer, put a +1/+1 counter on Legolas. So this is really cool. So if you have like a bunch of like buffing up cards, Legolas gets even buffer. You play something on him and he always gets stronger, regardless of what else that spell does. And then even beyond that, whenever you cast a spell that targets a creature you don't control, so if you're also casting like curses and nasty stuff on your opponent's creatures, Legolas deals damage equal to its power to up to one target creature. So that's wild. That seems really powerful to me. He keeps getting stronger, and then you every time you buff him up, he gets like doubly powerful, and then every time you go after your opponent's creatures, he starts shooting them down. So that's nasty. That's a pretty cool card. This one I love just for how crazy it is. This is referring, of course, the Ents. One of the things that Treebeard says when he meets the hobbits is he doesn't remember hobbits from the list of living things. So the Ents are always very long-winded, and they have this big long list of all the creatures that were ever were that they remember in like this rhyming song. And he sort of runs back through the list trying to find where the hobbits are in the list, and he can't find them. So the hobbits like help him write a new verse to the song to add hobbits into his list. But so I love that they took that little moment and they put it into this saga. It's only a one green mana saga, long list of the Ents, but it has 6 steps, which I'm not sure I've ever seen a saga with that many steps to it. And it says, for every single one, you're going to do the same thing, and it's note a creature type that hasn't been noted for long list of the Ents. When you cast your next creature spell of that type this turn, that creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So that's really cool. It helps you like buff up all your creatures. And again, this is a great one for a creature heavy deck, but it's a great one for a creature heavy deck where all the creatures are a little bit different. Like they all have different types. That's what's going to help you make them all really strong. So that's a pretty cool one. I like that one, especially from a 1 mana. That could be you could get suddenly a bunch of buff dudes down really fast. So that's cool. This is another fun one story-wise. So of course, early in the story, we meet the fellowship, the group of hobbits cross over a farmer's land, Farmer Cotton, and Frodo has bad memories of like sneaking onto his land and being chased by his dogs. So this is a reference to that. So this is Farmer Maggot's dogs, Mushroom Watchdogs, 1/1 green creature dog. It's a 2/2. Sacrifice of food, put a +1/+1 counter on Mushroom Watchdogs. It gains vigilance until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So I like the story bit there. I like the reference. You feed them up and they get tougher and more watchful. That's cool. I just like that. And here we go. It's another one of our favorite hobbits, Peregrine Took. He's 2/1 green, legendary halfling citizen. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus an additional food token are created instead. And also, if you sacrifice 3 foods, you get a card. And he's a 2/3. So that's really cool. Again, great for a token deck. He's going to let you, every time you make tokens, he makes an extra token. He gets you more food. And then you can use that food to get yourself more cards. So that's pretty neat. He's a pretty neat guy. Aragorn. All the Aragorn cards I love. They're like, they all do really cool stuff. So this one is called Company Leader. It's a 1 green and 1 white. So now we're into the multicolor cards. He's a 3/3, and whenever the ring tempts you, if you chose a creature other than Aragorn, Company Leader, as your ring bearer, put your choice of a counter from among First Strike, Vigilance, Death Touch, and Lifelink on Aragorn. So this is interesting. So whenever the ring tempts you, you have to pick one of your creatures as the ring bearer. And there's a couple of cards like this that sort of reward you for not choosing this creature as the ring bearer. So if you choose someone else, then Aragorn can like upgrade one of your other characters to make them. Aragorn upgrades him. He himself upgrades. He gets First Strike, Vigilance, Death Touch, or Lifelink. And that's a counter that you just put on him. So that means he just has that ability from then on. It's not like until the end of the turn or something. This is like, he's got that now. That's awesome. And then there's even more. It says, whenever you put one or more counters on Aragorn, put one of each of those kinds of counters on up to one other target creature. So he also then upgrades your other creatures. And again, that's like for as long as they're out, as long as you have them out on the battlefield, they have that counter on them. So that's wild. That is a cool card. And then here's Aragorn again. Now this one's going to be harder to play, Aragorn the Uniter, because this one will cost you 1 red, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 blue. So you've got to have a a 4-color deck or some crazy mana generating cards to get this guy out. Whenever you cast a white spell, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever you cast a blue spell, scry 2. Whenever you cast a red spell, Aragorn the Uniter deals 3 damage to target opponent. Whenever you cast a green spell, target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. This guy's a mythic rare. He's a 5/5 and he's crazy. So if you've got a deck put together of all these different colors, he does something related to each of those 4 colors whenever you cast a spell of that color. So that's really cool. He lets you scry, he lets you do damage, he creates more tokens, he makes your creatures bigger. Like, he's cool. That is a very cool card. Hard to put together a deck like that to make it work, I find. I call those like rainbow decks when you have like a ton of colors like that. It's hard to, by the time you've got enough mana out to actually do what you want to do, a lot of times you're dead because the other guy's been kicking your butt while you've been building up your mana. But I don't know, maybe you could make it work, especially if you have like, there's a lot of green cards that let you, and a lot of special artifact cards that let you add mana of any color. So you could probably make it work. I'll definitely try to make it work. I know. So that's an exciting card. Here's another fun one, the Balrog. Gotta love the Balrog. Doran's Bane. 5, a black and a red. Legendary demon. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each permanent sacrifice this turn. So if you've got a red-black deck where you've got a lot of sacrificing that you can do, you can get him out faster. He has haste, which is nasty because he's a 7/5. And he can't be blocked except by legendary creatures. So if you can get this guy out quick, if you can like sacrifice some little dudes, slam him out, and then he just like blows over everybody and hits for 7, he's pretty nasty. And then when he dies, he destroys an artifact or creature an opponent controls. So he's just super nasty. I mean, as a Balrog should be, story-wise. He smotes you in his ruin, as it were. As he dies, he does even worse stuff. So that's a cool one. That's a cool one. This one I like story-wise. So this is Doors of Doran. This is the Door of Moria. You can see Gandalf lighting up the Door of Moria here. And it's a 3, a red and a green, legendary artifact. Whenever you attack, scry 2. Then you may reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. That's awesome. So you're attacking, you always get to scry 2, and then if you can manipulate it so that there's a creature on top, suddenly that creature pops out and joins the attack. So that's really cool. And it says, until your next turn, it gains trample if you control a dwarf, and hexproof if you control an elf. So this is really cool. So like the green is the elves and the red is the dwarves. That's kind of like the symbology they're using here. And the elves and the dwarves sort of work together to create this doorway into Moria. So it's got like, you know, if you've got the dwarf, then you get like a special ability. If you've got the elf, you get a special ability that makes sense. So I don't know. I just think that's really cool. And of course it says speak friend and enter the password to get into Moria from this door. So yeah, I just love the story there. That's a pretty powerful card too, really. It's a rare, but it does cost you 5. So, and here we go. Flame of Anor. 1 blue and 1 red. It's an instant. Choose 1. If you control a wizard, as you cast the spell, you may choose 2 instead. Target player draws 2 cards. Destroy target artifact. Flame of Anor deals 5 damage to target creature. That's pretty cool. This is a cool spell. It's only 3 mana. It's an instant. And if you've got a wizard spell, if you've got a blue-red deck with lots of instants and lots of wizards, you know, you can do some nasty stuff here. You get 2 cards. You could take out somebody's artifact. You could just take out a creature with that deal 5 damage. That's cool. That's a nice card. This is another fun one. I love this one. This is one of the first cards they revealed from this set. And I loved it right away because I love the way it tells a story with the mechanics here. So this is Gandalf the Grey, 3 blue-red, which makes sense. He's a wizard, legendary creature. He, of course, this card would go great with Flame of Anor. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, choose one that hasn't been chosen. You may tap or untap target permanent. So that's cool. You can either wake up one of your guys or knock down one of your opponent's guys. Gandalf the Grey deals 3 damage to each opponent. That's always good. Copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. That's always really powerful and cool. So you cast this guy's out. He casts the spell. He copies the spell. Now you've got like twice the power. But then the last part is put Gandalf on top of its owner's library. So once you've done the 3 cool things, because you have to keep doing one that hasn't been chosen yet, whenever you cast a spell, he goes away. Which is a great story-wise because, especially in The Hobbit, that was always happening. He would show up, do something amazing, and then he would just disappear, and you'd be like, "Where the heck did Gandalf go? We need his help." So I love that, the way that he shows up, does amazing things, and then disappears. And this is a rare 3/4, so that's a cool card. This is another neat one. Again, story-wise, this is Gandalf's Sanction. I love the way they tell parts of the story in these cards. So this is a 1 blue and 1 red sorcery. This is recreating the moment when Gandalf basically kicks Saruman out of the Council of Wizards. He breaks his staff. So this says, Gandalf's Sanction deals X damage to target creature, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. Excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead. So this is really cool. Again, great for a blue-red deck with lots of sorceries and instants. Once you've done a bunch of those, you can just blow up your opponent's creature, and you could hit them real hard. You could take out a big creature, or you could hit, a little creature, blow it away, and then all that excess damage goes to your opponent. So you could take them out maybe with this card. So that's really cool. This is an uncommon. Okay, so now we've got a white-black here. This is King of the Oathbreakers, 2, a white and a black, legendary spirit. So this guy's pretty cool. This is, of course, the ghosts that Aragorn raises to fight with him when he goes to the Paths of the Dead. This is their king. He's a 3/3. He has flying because he's a spirit. Whenever King of the Oathbreakers or another spirit you control becomes the target of a spell, it phases out. Whenever King of the Oathbreakers or another spirit you control phases in, create a tapped 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. So this is wild. So anytime your opponent tries to cast any kind of a spell on your spirits, they just phase out. It just doesn't affect them at all. And then when they come back, suddenly there's more of them. You got more spirits popping up. So this is great for a token deck, for a deck with a lot of spirits in it, obviously. Yeah, you're going to be it's not really quite like being hexproof because you can't then use the creature while it's phased out, but it's still pretty cool. He can't be hit, and he's got all these creatures that keep popping up around him. Here's the Mouth of Sauron. So he's a human advisor, legendary creature. So this is an interesting character. He's sort of like a fallen Númenórean who works for Sauron. He's kind of like his negotiator or his mouthpiece, the guy who goes out and his ambassador almost. So he's a 3 and 1 blue and 1 black. He's a 3/4. When the Mouth of Sauron enters the battlefield, target player mills 3 cards, then amass Orcs X, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in that player's graveyard. So this is interesting. So this guy is good against somebody who's got a bunch of instant and sorcery cards. And he's good for a mill deck, of course, which everybody hates mill decks, but they can be effective. So he makes you scroll through your cards, and then he builds up a horrible army, especially if you've got a bunch of instant and sorceries in there. Now we've got Rise of the Witch King, which is a 2 with a black and green sorcery. Each player sacrifices a creature. This means you also have to sacrifice a creature. But if you sacrifice a creature this way, you may return another permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that's pretty powerful. So you could have a little guy out, you play this, you take out one of your opponent's creatures, your little guy disappears, and suddenly you bring back some big horrible dude who died earlier. That's pretty cool. Anything that can bring a permanent back from the graveyard to the battlefield is a pretty powerful card as far as I'm concerned. And this is, of course, a black-green, which is great for a graveyard deck like that, where you're bringing creatures back from the grave. Here's another Saruman. This time he's a 3, a white, a blue, and a black, because this is Saruman of many colors. This is something that does happen in the book, where he decides he's no longer Saruman the White. He's Saruman of many colors because he's getting a little boastful and proud of his own power. So he has a nasty ward, which is discard an enchantment, instant, or sorcery card. So if you want to do anything to him, you got to give up one of these cards. He's a 5/4. He's a mythic. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, each opponent mills 2 cards. So he's going to make you mill every time you're casting a second spell. When one or more cards are milled this way, exile target enchantment, instant, or sorcery card with equal or lesser mana value than that spell from an opponent's graveyard. Copy the exiled card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. That's pretty powerful. So yeah, that's a pretty cool one. It's interesting, these Saruman ones, about a lot of these are about like when you cast your second spell. So you want a spell heavy deck, maybe a lot of little ones, because you're going to be able to copy them and do some cool stuff. And this lets you copy cards that are your opponent's cards. That's always cool too. Here we go, the big guy, Sauron the Dark Lord. So this is a 3, a blue, black, and a red. Legendary Avatar Horror, 7/6, a mythic. He has a really nasty ward power too. If you want to do anything to him, you have to sacrifice a legendary artifact or a legendary creature, which is wow. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, amass Orcs 1. That's nasty. Anytime your opponent casts any spell, you're making orc armies and they're getting bigger. that's really nasty. Whenever an army you control deals combat damage to a player, the ring tempts you. So you're getting more powerful as your armies attack. The ring is making you more powerful. And whenever the ring tempts you, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 4 cards. That's pretty wild. So you could the cool thing about that is maybe you don't have any cards left. Maybe you've played a bunch of cards. Suddenly you've got 4 more. Whenever the ring tempts you. That's damn powerful. So that's a cool card. Again, 3 colors there, so that's going to make it a little more complicated. But it's 6 mana, but it's not that hard to play, I don't think. So that's a pretty cool one. Now here's another fun one for if you want to do a tribal deck. If you want to do a horse deck, this is Shadowfax, Lord of Horses. So it's a 3, a red, and a white. Legendary horse, 4/4. Horses you control have haste. So all your horses have haste. And whenever Shadowfax, Lord of Horses attacks, you may put a creature card with lesser power from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. That's really cool. So if you've got a bunch of little horses, they pop out and attack with him. Very nice. Well, they don't even have to be horses, but I mean, you'd obviously want a bunch of horses. I didn't see a lot of horse creature cards in this set, but I mean, you could put some. I think Build a Pony is legendary too, so you couldn't have a lot of him out at the same time. But I'm sure you could find some horses somewhere in the in the history of Magic. This guy's really nasty. This is another one that's great for a tribal deck, but this time tribal with spiders. So this is Shelob, Child of Ungoliant, 4 black-green. I love that they bring in Ungoliant there from the Silmarillion. That's sort of like the grandmommy of Shelob. Legendary creature, Spider Demon. She has Death Touch, Ward 2, and she gives any other spiders you have Death Touch and Ward 2, which is nasty. And then, whenever another creature dealt damage this turn by a spider you control dies, which they're gonna because your spiders all have Death Touch, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a food artifact. So I love this, again, story-wise. All her horrible little children are turning your opponent's monsters into food. And it loses all other card types, obviously. They just get turned right into food. So that's nasty. Again, a great one for Spider Tribal. Maybe you could have some tokens. You could have some stuff that uses food. That's just... I'm looking forward to trying to build a deck with her. That's going to be powerful stuff. She's a rare. Then we got Smeagol, Helpful Guide. 1, a black and a green, legendary halfling horror. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control this turn, the ring tempts you. Whenever the ring tempts you, target opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped under your control, and the rest into their graveyard. That's wild. So he's a rare. He's a 4/2. So he's He's got more power than toughness, which is interesting. So he's like he can hit you hard, but he's not. He's kind of weak. That kind of I see that as a definition of Smeagol. And then this, he, whenever the ring tempts you, you just steal your opponent's lands. That's nasty, and you're milling them too, to a certain extent, because you're digging through their deck until you find a land. So you always get a land from them. That's a pretty nasty card. I like that one. It's only 3 mana. Um, Now here's a weird one. This is another one where you got to have a rainbow deck, but this is Tom Bombadil, who you don't see in the movies, but he is part of the story, part of the book. He costs you a white, a blue, a black, a red, and a green. So you got to have all the colors. Rainbow decks are really hard to do. I know. I've tried to build them, and it's rarely very effective. And this guy's powers are very weird and like specific. So you got to have like a bunch of sagas and stuff to make him work right. And I feel like this guy's gonna be really hard to use, but it would be interesting to try. So he's a mythic. He's 4/4. As long as there are 4 or more lore counters among sagas you control, so you've got to have a bunch of sagas out. Tom Bombadil has hexproof and indestructible. So that's how you pump him up, as you have sagas out with like lore counters on them. Whenever the final chapter ability of a saga you control resolves, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a saga card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This ability triggers only once each turn. So you want sagas out, and every time one completes, he grabs you another one. Um, but how useful is that going to be? I'm not sure. It's interesting. And it's going to be really hard to get this guy out, obviously, because you got to have 5 mana and they got to all be different colors. um, so that's interesting. He's an interesting guy. I feel like it's going to be pretty hard to use him well, but it might be possible. Um, okay, now we're going into artifacts. We're almost done. This is Anduril, Flame of the West. It costs you 3, legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +3/+1, which is pretty badass. Whenever a equipped creature attacks, create 2 tapped 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying. If that creature is legendary, instead create the tokens and they're tapped and attacking. And it costs you 2 to equip this. Pretty cool. It's a little weird that there's like spirits flying around you when you're using Anduril. But I guess I see what they're going for, and I love the art. This picture is just beautiful. And it's pretty cool that every time you're attacking with this guy, you're getting these more tokens. So this is another one that's great for a token deck, where he's just building up all these little guys. Um, and another famous sword here is Glamdring, which costs you 2, legendary equipment. Equipped creature has first strike and gets +1/+0 for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. So obviously this is Gandalf's sword, so it makes sense that it would work really well with a instant and sorcery deck. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to that damage, without paying its mana cost. So that's really cool. The more spells you've cast, the stronger it is, and also it lets you cast more spells. 3 to equip. Pretty cool. Pretty neat sword. Here's Horn of Gondor, cost you 3, legendary artifact. When Horn of Gondor enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Again, you're getting more tokens here. And then you can pay 3 and tap it and create X 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of humans you control. So the more humans you have, the more humans you can make. So you can just, this can be like a token generator card here, which is very nice. Again, for a token deck. A lot of good stuff for token decks in this set. Here's Lembas, the Elven Waybread. This will cost you 2, artifact food. Again, it's a food token, but it's not a token. This is actually a food artifact. It has the same ability as a regular food, which is you pay to tap it, sacrifice it, you get 3 life. But it also lets you scry 1 and draw a card when it comes into the battlefield, which is really cool. And when it goes to the graveyard from the battlefield, its owner shuffles it into their library, which is really cool. It never really goes away. Like, you use it and then it comes back, which is really neat. It sort of sustains you. I think that's the idea. They're trying to like capture that story-wise, what Lembas does. So that's really cool. And here's another legendary artifact. It's the Mirror of Galadriel. Only costs you 2, but it doesn't do much until you get enough mana to use it, which you need 5 mana and tap it, and then it lets you scry 1 and draw a card. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. Again, legendaries are important. You want a lot of legendaries, and then this is cheaper to use. And if you have a lot of legendaries, it becomes super powerful because then you can just keep tapping it, scrying, and drawing cards. Obviously, you can only do that once a turn because you have to tap it, unless you can untap it somehow. Um, but yeah, that's pretty cool. The Mithril coat. This is the coat that Bilbo had that he gave to Frodo. Costs you 3 in its equipment. It has flash and indestructible. When it enters the battlefield, it immediately gets attached to a target legendary creature, which is really nice. Any equipment that does that is always really useful. And that equipped creature then has indestructible, which is really cool. And then it'll cost you 3 if you need to equip it again after that. So that's a pretty cool card. I remember a card like that. That could get generated by that Dark Steel Hydra could generate a token card like this. But this one is really cool. It has flash, indestructible, and makes you indestructible. Here's another fun one, really cool art. The Palantir of Orthanc, 3 legendary offer. At the beginning of your end step, put an influence counter. So there's another one with weird counters that they made up for this. Put an influence counter on Palantir of Orthanc and scry 2. So every turn you can scry 2, which is wild. Then target opponent may have you draw a card. If that player doesn't, you mill X cards, where X is the number of influence counters on Palantir of Orthanc, and that player loses life equal to the total mana value of those cards. This one's kind of a mind bender. So basically, you hold your opponent hostage to a certain extent. You scry 2, and then he can either let you draw a card, or you get to mill cards and then use those cards, their power, to hurt your opponent. So really interesting, both story wise and like, and power wise. That's a weird one. It's very interesting. It gives your opponent like this horrible decision they have to make every turn. So that's really interesting. And here's another legendary artifact, the Phial of Galadriel for 3. If you would draw a card while you have no cards in hand, draw 2 cards instead. If you would gain life while you have 5 or less life, you gain twice that much life instead. And you can also tap it and get a mana of any color. So that any artifact that lets you get a mana of any color is huge. And then it has these other cool abilities, which again, I love story-wise. What they're saying is it's the light in the darkest hour. Like it gives you when you're your worst, it's gonna help you. It's gonna if you only have 1 card left, if you have no cards left, suddenly now you have 2. If you have very little life, suddenly you have twice that much, not twice that much, but you know what I mean. You get more than you would have otherwise. So it's a cool card. I really like that one. Another legendary artifact is the Stone of Eric, which only costs you 1. And if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. So it makes everybody get exiled who's dying. And then you can pay to tap it and sacrifice it, and you can exile a player's entire graveyard, and you get a card. So that's pretty cool, especially if you're playing against like a somebody who's digging through their graveyard to bring their cards back, their big guys back. You can just wipe all that out in one fell swoop, and you get an extra card. And it's only 1 mana, and that ability only costs you 2 mana. That's pretty cool. And I think this is my last one. Yeah, I finally got to the last one that I want to talk about. There are a couple of pretty interesting, weird, special lands, but this one I just wanted to highlight because it's Mount Doom. I mean, come on. Legendary land. This is one of those ones that is a multicolor land, so it gives you black or red, but you have to pay life to get that. So you tap it, you pay 1 life, and you get a black or a red. You get to choose, but it doesn't come out tapped. A lot of times, multicolored lands will come out tapped unless you meet certain circumstances. So this one, what you're paying is not an extra turn, but an extra life every time. But it also has these other abilities that are pretty wild. So if you pay 1, a black and a red, and tap, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, which is always nice. Hit him a little bit harder. And that's a typical red ability. You just keep hitting people for little bits of damage. And then it has another even more horrible ability, which is you pay 5, a black and a red, tap it, sacrifice it, and sacrifice a legendary artifact. So you're paying a lot for this. That's a high price. Choose up to 2 creatures, then destroy the rest. Activate only as a sorcery. So it's a board wiper as well. So it wipes out everybody except 2. So those 2 could both be yours, or you might have to pick at least one of your opponents if you don't have many left. But still, That's nasty for a land to have, that it can just wipe the board like that. Anyway, I've been talking for a long time and my voice hurts and my throat hurts and I need to go and do other things with my life. But I hope you've enjoyed this tour of the Lord of the Rings Magic the Gathering set. I'm really excited about it. It's coming out this month. June 20th, it's going to be on Arena. Most of the time when I play Magic the Gathering, I'm on Arena. Um, I'll try to remember to put my username in the comments of this video, so you can, or the description. So if you want to challenge me or friend me in Arena, that'd be cool. I love playing Arena. I'm on there pretty much every day. Um, so yeah, I'm definitely going to be building a lot of decks with this. I got the paper cards. I pre-ordered the paper cards as well as pre-ordered the Arena digital cards. So yeah, I'm very excited about this. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now. I really love the art. I really love this, what they've done with this. So very excited to try it out. I'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching.